The judgment stone weighed more than any ordinary rock should. It sat in the center of the tribunal platform like a monument to cruelty, its surface dark and ancient, stained with the tears and blood of generations. Estes knelt before it, her wrists bound in iron chains that bit into her skin, her heart hammering against her ribs as the entire Thornwood pack circled the clearing to witness her destruction. Estes Morwin, you stand accused of theft from the Alpha's treasury, deception against your Luna, and conspiracy to undermine the sacred bonds of this pack. Elder Cormac's voice rang through the night air like a death knell. His gray beard trembled with barely contained satisfaction as he read from the scroll of accusations. Behind him, seated on the carved wooden throne that had belonged to Thornwood Alphas for 300 years, sat Darwin Vex, the most powerful Alpha in the Northern Territories, the man whose face haunted Estes's dreams, and the wolf who had never once looked at her as anything more than a shadow servant sweeping the floors of his great hall. Tonight, his steel-gray eyes were fixed on her with an expression she couldn't read. His jaw was tight, his massive frame rigid in his ceremonial blacks, and his hands gripped the armrests of his throne as if he were restraining himself from something violent. "I didn't steal anything," Estes whispered, but her voice was swallowed by the jeering crowd. "Silence, Omega!" The command came from Lysette Harrow, Darwin's intended mate, the daughter of the neighboring Silvercrest Alpha, and the woman who had orchestrated every moment of Estes's suffering for the past 3 years. Lysette stood beside Darwin's throne in a gown of midnight blue, her auburn hair cascading over her shoulders like a waterfall of fire, her emerald eyes glittering with triumph. She had planted the stolen gold in Estes's quarters. She had whispered lies into Elder Cormac's ear. She had ensured that every witness who might have spoken in Estes's defense had been threatened into silence. And now she would watch Estes's hands be crushed beneath the judgment stone, the traditional punishment for thieves in Thornwood territory. Without her hands, Estes would never sculpt again. She would never hold a chisel, never shape clay, never create the small figurines she sold in the village market to survive. Lysette knew this. That was exactly why she had chosen this accusation. "Please, Alpha Darwin, I beg you to hear me. I have served this pack faithfully for 5 years. I have never taken so much as a crust of bread that wasn't offered. The gold was placed in my room. Someone is lying to you, please." "The evidence was found beneath your floorboards." Darwin's voice cut through her plea like a blade. He rose from his throne, and the crowd fell instantly silent. At 6'4", with shoulders broad enough to block out the moonlight, and a presence that made the air itself feel heavier, Darwin Vex commanded attention simply by existing. When he spoke, wolves listened. When he moved, they parted. He descended the 3 steps from his throne platform and walked toward Estes with slow, measured strides that made her stomach clench with terror. "I didn't put it there. Someone else did. Please, you have to believe me." "I don't have to do anything." He stopped before her, looking down at her kneeling form with those unreadable gray eyes. This close, she could see the shadows beneath them, the tension in his neck, the way his nostrils flared as if he were scenting something that confused him. His wolf was restless. She could feel it, a strange awareness she'd always had around him but had never understood. "Alpha Darwin," her voice broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks, carving hot tracks through the dirt and grime of the dungeon cell where she'd spent the last 3 days. She had stopped eating on the second day, unable to force food past the knot of terror in her throat. She was thin to begin with. Omega wolves always were, given the scraps of the pack's resources. But now she was gaunt, trembling, a ghost of the quiet sculptress who had lived in the shadows of Thornwood Hall. Darwin stared at her for a long moment. Something flickered in his eyes, something that looked almost like doubt, almost like pain. But it vanished before she could name it. He turned away from her. "Proceed with the punishment." The crowd roared its approval. Lysette's red lips curved into a satisfied smile. Elder Cormac gestured to the two enforcers waiting beside the judgment stone, and they seized Estes by the arms, dragging her forward despite her screams. "No! No, please! I'm innocent! I didn't do anything wrong!" Her cries echoed through the clearing, but no one moved to help her. The pack had already decided her guilt. The evidence had been damning. Gold coins, bearing the Alpha's seal, hidden in the one place no one would think to look, in the quarters of a lowly Omega servant who had no family, no allies, no one to speak for her. They forced her hands onto the flat surface of the judgment stone. The rock was cold, so cold it burned, and she felt something ancient and terrible stirring within it. A power that had been used to punish wrongdoers since before the first wolves had claimed this territory. Her fingers splayed helplessly against the dark surface, pale and fragile, the hands of an artist, the only beautiful thing she possessed. Lysette stepped forward, her heels clicking against the stone platform as she approached with a ceremonial mallet in her hands. By pack law, the accuser had the right to deliver the punishment, and Lysette had accused. "You should have known your place, little Omega. You should have stayed invisible." Estes looked up at her through tear-blurred eyes, and for one crystalline moment she understood everything. Lysette hadn't done this because of the gold. Lysette hadn't done this because of any crime at all. She had done it because 3 weeks ago, Estes had been cleaning the main hall when Darwin had walked through, and he had stopped, actually stopped, and asked her name. It had been nothing, a moment of idle curiosity. He had moved on without waiting for her stuttered answer, probably forgotten her face before he'd even left the room. But Lysette had seen. And Lysette had understood something that Estes herself had never dared to acknowledge. The Alpha's wolf had recognized something in the Omega sculptress, something that threatened everything Lysette had spent years cultivating. "Please, I have nothing. I am nothing. Just let me go. I'll leave the territory. You'll never see me again." "You're right about one thing. You are nothing. And you will be even less when I'm finished with you." Lysette raised the mallet. "Wait!" Darwin's voice stopped her mid-swing. He was standing at the edge of the platform now, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression still maddeningly neutral. The crowd murmured in confusion. Elder Cormac frowned. "The law states the Alpha must witness the first blow. Move aside, Lysette. I will observe properly." Lysette's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered. She dipped her head in graceful submission and stepped to the left, giving Darwin an unobstructed view of Estes's trembling hands. He walked closer and closer until he was standing directly over her, his shadow falling across her broken body like a shroud. For one wild, desperate second, Estes thought he might show mercy. The way he was looking at her, that strange, searching intensity, surely it meant something. Surely he saw her innocence. Surely his wolf knew the truth, even if his mind refused to acknowledge it. "Look at me, Estes." She raised her eyes to his face. Up close, she could see the gold flecks buried in the gray of his irises, the faint scar that traced his left eyebrow, the cruel perfection of his mouth. He was beautiful in the way storms were beautiful, devastating and untouchable. I didn't do it. I know. The words were so soft she almost didn't hear them. Her heart seized in her chest. He knew. He knew she was innocent, and he was going to let them destroy her anyway. Then why? Because I cannot prove it. And without proof, the pack demands justice. This is the price of order, Estes. I am sorry. He stepped back. He nodded to Lysette, and Lysette brought the mallet down with all the strength of her rage. The sound Estes made wasn't quite a scream. It was something worse. A high, thin wail of agony that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her body, somewhere in the very core of her soul. The judgment stone pulsed with dark light as her bones shattered beneath its weight. As her fingers bent at angles that shouldn't have been possible, as the pain overwhelmed every thought, every sensation, every memory of who she had been before this moment. She heard Lysette laughing. She heard the crowd cheering. She heard Elder Cormac's satisfied grunt. But beneath all of that, she heard something else. A voice, ancient and vast and terrifyingly gentle, whispering from somewhere inside the stone itself. Child of crystal, daughter of the forgotten line, your blood calls to me across the ages. Your pain has woken what should have slept. Do you want power, little sculptor? Do you want to shape more than clay? Estes couldn't answer. She couldn't think. She could only feel the agony pulsing through her ruined hands, the wrongness of her broken bones, the destruction of everything she had lived for. Answer me. Yes. The word escaped her lips on a breath of pure despair, and the judgment stone exploded. The blast sent Lysette flying backward into Elder Cormac, knocked Darwin off his feet, and scattered the watching pack members like leaves in a hurricane. Estes remained at the center of the destruction, her broken hands pressed to the stone's surface as light, pure, blinding, crystalline light, poured from the ancient rock and into her shattered bones. She screamed again, but this time it wasn't pain. It was something else. Something that felt like being unmade and remade simultaneously. Like every cell in her body was being examined and redesigned by a consciousness too vast to comprehend. Her hands. She could feel her hands. They were healing. No, they were transforming. The shattered bones were fusing back together, but not into flesh and blood, into something harder, something stronger, something that caught the moonlight and reflected it back in 1,000 prismatic colors. Crystal. Her hands were becoming crystal. She lifted them from the ruined surface of the judgment stone and stared at her fingers, translucent and shimmering, faceted like cut diamonds, catching every available light source and splitting it into rainbows. They were beautiful. They were terrifying. They were hers. What is this? The ancient voice in her mind responded, but not in words this time, in images, in memories that weren't her own. She saw a woman who looked like her, the same dark hair, the same pale skin, the same stubborn jaw, standing at the edge of a cliff 1,000 years ago. The woman's hands were crystal too, and she was using them to shape the very rock beneath her feet, pulling towers from the earth, carving palaces from mountains, sculpting reality itself into whatever form she desired. "You are the last of the sculptors," the voice whispered. "Your bloodline was nearly extinguished. Your power slept for generations. But it has woken now, child. And with it, you can shape more than stone. You can shape truth. You can shape justice. You can shape the very fabric of what is." The crowd had gone silent. Estes rose slowly to her feet, her crystal hands glowing softly in the darkness, and turned to face the pack that had been ready to watch her destroyed. Darwin was already standing. His gray eyes were wide with something that might have been shock, might have been fear, might have been the beginning of understanding. His wolf was howling inside him. She could feel it now, could hear it through some connection she didn't understand. And it was howling one word over and over again: mate, mate, mate. But Estes didn't know that yet. All she knew was that her hands were no longer broken. That power was singing through her veins like a symphony of possibilities, and that every single person who had stood by and watched her torture was now looking at her with terror in their eyes. Good. Let them be afraid. "You wanted to break me." Her voice was different now, stronger, clearer. It cut through the silence like a blade of light. "You wanted to destroy the only gift I had, the only thing that made my life worth living." She turned her crystal palms upward, watching the moonlight dance through them, feeling the power coil beneath their surface like a living thing waiting to be unleashed. "I was innocent. I told you I was innocent, and none of you believed me. None of you cared. I was just an omega, just a servant, just a shadow in the corner of your great hall, invisible until I became convenient to blame." Lysette was struggling to her feet, her perfect gown torn, her elegant hair disheveled, her face pale with fury and fear. "She's a witch! She's been hiding dark magic all along! This proves her guilt! Alpha Darwin, you must execute her immediately!" "Be silent." Darwin's command cracked through the air like a whip. Lysette flinched as if she'd been struck. In all the years of their courtship, he had never used that tone with her. He had never looked at her with such undisguised contempt. He walked toward Estes slowly, his boots crunching over the debris of the shattered judgment stone. The crowd watched in breathless silence. No one moved. No one dared. "What are you?" Estes met his gaze without flinching. The power humming through her crystal hands had changed something inside her, had burned away the timid Omega who spent 5 years with her eyes cast down and her voice barely above a whisper. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who was only beginning to understand her own potential. "I am what you tried to break. The Judgment Stone has been used for 300 years. It has never done anything like this. It responds to the guilt or innocence of the accused, but it has never... It responded to me, to what I am, a sculptor, the last of a bloodline your ancestors thought they destroyed." Darwin went very still. Something flickered behind his eyes. A memory, perhaps, or a piece of pack history he had learned as a child and dismissed as legend. The crystal shapers, the women who could bend reality. They were supposed to be extinct. Apparently not. A long moment of silence stretched between them. The connection between them pulsed with something neither of them wanted to acknowledge. The mate bond, pulling at them both, demanding recognition, demanding completion. But too much had happened. Too much damage had been done. Estes. No! She stepped back from him, and his wolf howled with rejection inside his chest. She could hear it. She could feel it. But she would not accept it. Not now. Maybe not ever. You knew I was innocent. You told me so yourself, right before you let her destroy my hands. You chose your pack's politics over the truth. You chose order over justice. You let me scream, Alpha Darwin. You let me break. Her crystal hands clenched at her sides, and the ground beneath their feet trembled. Small fissures appeared in the stone platform, spreading outward from where she stood like cracks in a frozen lake. I will not forget that. I will not forgive that. Whatever this thing is between us, whatever your wolf is trying to tell you, it doesn't matter. You had your chance to show me who you are, and you did. I know exactly what kind of alpha you are now. She turned and walked away from him, away from the tribunal platform, away from the pack that had tried to destroy her. The crowd parted before her like water before a ship's prow, every wolf pressing backward to avoid contact with her glowing crystal hands. No one tried to stop her. No one dared. She made it 3 miles into the forest before the power overwhelmed her and she collapsed. The transformation of her hands had been only the beginning. Her entire body was burning now, reshaping itself from the inside out, and she lay curled on the cold forest floor as wave after wave of agony washed through her. Bones shifted, muscles reformed. Something in her very blood changed, becoming faster, stronger, more volatile. When it was finally over, she lay gasping in the moonlight, covered in sweat and tears, trembling like a newborn deer. Her hands were still crystal, that hadn't changed, but the rest of her felt different, more solid, more present, more real. She pushed herself up on shaking arms and looked around. The forest was silent, except for the distant hoot of an owl and the whisper of wind through the autumn leaves. She was alone, truly alone, for perhaps the first time in her life. The pack had been her entire world since childhood. When her parents died in a rogue attack when she was 12, she had been absorbed into Thornwood territory as an Omega, the lowest rank, the most expendable. She had spent 13 years surviving on scraps and shadows, invisible to everyone except when they needed someone to blame. And now, she was something else entirely, something powerful, something that scared even the Alpha himself. She lifted her crystal hands and focused on a nearby stone. The power stirred inside her, eager and ancient, and when she reached out, not with her fingers, but with her will, she felt the stone respond. It wanted to be shaped. It was begging her to shape it. She thought of a flower, a simple rose, like the ones that grew wild along the territory's southern border, and the stone changed. It flowed and shifted and reformed, and when the process was complete, a perfect crystal rose sat in its place, catching the moonlight in its translucent petals. Oh. The word escaped her on a breath of pure amazement. She could do this. She could actually do this. She could shape reality itself. For an hour, she experimented. She transformed stones into sculptures, reshaped fallen branches into elegant spirals, pulled miniature towers from the earth just by thinking about them. The power was vast, far vaster than she had any idea how to control, but it responded to her emotions, her intentions, her desires. When she was calm, it was precise. When she was angry, it was explosive. She would need to learn control. She would need to understand the limits of this gift, if it even had limits at all. But for the first time in her life, she had something that was truly hers, something no one could take from her, something that made her more than an invisible omega, more than a convenient scapegoat, more than a shadow. The ancient voice from the judgment stone stirred again in the back of her mind, gentler now, almost fond. You learn quickly, child. Your ancestors would be proud. Who were they, my ancestors? How did I not know about any of this? The crystal shapers were hunted to extinction 300 years ago by werewolf packs who feared their power. Your grandmother escaped the purge by hiding her abilities, marrying a simple human, and raising your mother in ignorance. The bloodline slept for 3 generations, waiting for one strong enough to wake it. You, Estes, you are that one. She sat with this knowledge for a long time, turning it over in her mind like one of her sculptures. Her grandmother, her mother. A legacy of power and persecution stretching back centuries. And she had known nothing, had lived her whole life unaware of what burned in her blood. If the wolves feared us so much, why did they keep the judgment stone? It was made by us, wasn't it? By the shapers? Yes. The stone was created by your ancestors as a tool of truth. It could read the guilt or innocence of anyone who touched it and punish accordingly. When the pack slaughtered the shapers, they kept the stone because it was useful. But they did not understand it. They thought it was merely a magical artifact, not a doorway. When your blood touched it, when your pain called out, you awakened what slept within. I am the last echo of your great-grandmother, child. My consciousness was bound to the stone at the moment of my death. I have waited 300 years for one of my descendants to wake me. Estes's crystal hands trembled. She had felt alone her entire life. No family, no pack bond that mattered, no one who truly saw her. And now she discovered that her great-grandmother had been waiting for her, watching over her, sleeping inside a rock for 3 centuries just for the chance to give her this gift. Thank you. Use the power well, child. Remember that with the ability to shape reality comes the responsibility to shape it wisely. The wolves feared us because some of my sisters misused their gifts, created weapons, built empires, tried to rule rather than serve. That path leads only to destruction. But there is another path, a better one. Shape the world into something beautiful. Create justice where there is none. Protect those who cannot protect themselves. That is the true purpose of our gift. The voice faded, growing quieter, returning to its long sleep. But the power remained, thrumming through Estes' crystal hands like a second heartbeat, waiting to be used. She rose from the forest floor and looked at the stars scattered across the night sky. She had decisions to make, paths to choose. A whole new life stretching out before her, unmarked and unpredictable. She could leave Thornwood territory entirely, walk away from everything she had known, and start fresh somewhere far away, where no one had ever heard of the alpha who let her hands be crushed, or the pack that watched it happen with pleasure. But something held her back. Some stubborn ember of unfinished business burning in her chest. She had been falsely accused. She had been publicly humiliated. She had been tortured by a woman who had orchestrated the entire thing out of jealousy and spite. And while her power was new and untested, while she had no idea how to truly control it yet, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would not let Lysette Harrow get away with what she had done. Darwin stood at the window of his study, staring out at the dark forest that bordered his territory. Somewhere out there, his mate was alone, frightened, and absolutely furious with him. His wolf had not stopped howling since she walked away. It paced inside him like a caged beast, clawing at his control, demanding that he go after her, find her, claim her, explain everything. But Darwin knew that any attempt to approach Estes now would only make things worse. She needed time, space, the chance to understand her new power without his presence complicating everything. And he needed to deal with the snake in his own household. "Leave us." The command was directed at the two guards standing by the door of his study. They exchanged nervous glances. They had never heard their alpha sound quite like this before, but they obeyed without question, slipping out and closing the heavy oak door behind them. Lysette stood in the center of the room, her torn gown replaced by a fresh silk robe, her disheveled hair smoothed back into its usual perfect waves. She looked utterly composed, as if the judgment stone hadn't exploded in her face less than 3 hours ago, as if she hadn't witnessed the emergence of a power no one had seen for 3 centuries. "Darwin, darling, I know you must be upset. The tribunal didn't go quite as planned. But we can still salvage the situation. The Omega is clearly practicing dark magic. We simply need to send hunters after her and finish what we started." "I know you planted the gold." Lysette's smile flickered but didn't fall. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Don't you dare stand there and lie to me again. I smelled your scent all over her quarters. I found the threads of your gown caught on the loose floorboard where the gold was hidden. I knew from the moment the accusations were brought forward that you had orchestrated the entire thing. Lysette's composure finally cracked. Her eyes widened, her lips parted, and for one unguarded moment, her true nature showed through, calculating, ruthless, and utterly devoid of remorse. "If you knew, then why did you let the tribunal proceed? Why did you let me punish her?" Darwin turned from the window, and the look on his face made Lysette take an instinctive step backward. His eyes had shifted, the gray bleeding into the amber of his wolf. And when he spoke, there was a growl underlying every word. "Because I couldn't prove it. Because I am bound by the laws of this pack just as much as any other wolf. Because if I had stopped the tribunal without evidence, you would have used it against me. The other alphas in the coalition would have seen me as weak, unable to control my own territory, letting personal feelings override justice." He stalked toward her, and she retreated until her back hit the wall. "Do you understand what you've done, Lysette? Do you have any idea what you've unleashed? That woman is my mate, my fated mate, the other half of my soul, and you tortured her. You broke her hands. You tried to destroy everything she was." Lysette's face contorted with fury, all pretense of sweetness finally abandoned. "Your mate? That worthless Omega? I am the daughter of Alpha Harrow. I am the most suitable match for you in 4 territories. I have spent 3 years cultivating this alliance, preparing to be your Luna, building the political foundation for our joined packs. You are nothing." The words fell like stones into a frozen lake. Lysette flinched as if he had struck her. "You are a scheming, vindictive woman who saw a threat to her ambitions and tried to eliminate it through cruelty and deception. You are everything I despise in a potential Luna. And this alliance, this farce of a courtship, is over. You can't do this. My father will be informed that his daughter's actions violated the sacred trust of interpack relations. I will provide him with the evidence of your crimes. What he chooses to do with that information is his concern, not mine. Darwin moved to his desk and pulled out a rolled scroll, the documentation he had compiled over the past 3 days while Estes languished in the dungeon and Lysette believed she had won. You will leave Thornwood territory by dawn. You are banished from these lands permanently. If you are found within our borders after sunrise, you will be treated as a hostile intruder and dealt with accordingly. Lysette's face went white. Banishment was one of the most severe punishments in werewolf society. Only death was worse. She would return to her father's pack in disgrace, her reputation ruined, her prospects for a suitable match destroyed. Darwin, please. We can work this out. I made a mistake. I was jealous, yes, but only because I love you. Love? You don't know the meaning of the word. Get out of my sight before I forget that harming you would cause a diplomatic incident. Lysette stared at him for one long, terrible moment. Then her face twisted into something ugly, something full of hatred and promise of revenge. You'll regret this. You and your pathetic Omega both. I'll make sure of it. She swept out of the room, slamming the door behind her with enough force to rattle the frames on the wall. Darwin sank into the chair behind his desk and buried his face in his hands. His wolf was still howling, still demanding he go after Estes, still begging him to fix what he had broken. But some things couldn't be fixed easily. Some betrayals cut too deep. He had let his mate suffer. He had stood by and watched her torture because political consequences seemed more important than justice. And even though he had been preparing to expose Lysette's crimes, even though he had planned to publicly exonerate Estes and punish her accuser, none of that mattered now. The damage was done. The trust was shattered. How could he expect Estes to ever forgive him when he couldn't forgive himself? 3 days passed. Estes spent them in a cave she discovered deep in the forest, practicing her powers and trying to understand the full scope of what she had become. The crystal transformation of her hands seemed to be permanent. They remained translucent and faceted no matter what she did, but she discovered she could control their glow, dimming them to near-normal flesh tones when she wanted to blend in, or brightening them to blinding intensity when she needed light. Her sculpting abilities grew stronger with each passing hour. By the end of the first day, she could reshape small stones with a thought. By the end of the second, she could pull sculptures from solid rock faces. By the end of the third, she attempted something larger, creating a small shelter from the cave wall, complete with a bed platform, a table, and a doorway that sealed behind her. It was exhausting work. Each major creation drained something from her. Not energy exactly, but something deeper. Something she suspected was connected to her very life force. She would need to be careful. She couldn't simply reshape the world at will without consequences. But the power was intoxicating. After a lifetime of powerlessness, of being at the mercy of wolves who saw her as less than nothing, she finally had the ability to protect herself, to defend her dignity, to fight back. On the morning of the 4th day, she sensed him coming. The connection between them, the mate bond she refused to acknowledge, had grown stronger since her transformation. She could feel Darwin's presence now even from miles away. could sense the direction he was traveling, could almost hear the distress of his wolf calling out to hers. She emerged from her stone shelter and waited. He appeared through the trees 10 minutes later, alone and on foot, dressed in simple traveling clothes rather than the formal blacks of his position. He looked exhausted. There were dark circles under his gray eyes, and his usually immaculate hair was disheveled, as if he had been running his hands through it repeatedly. He stopped 20 feet from her and simply stood there, looking at her as if she were a miracle and a punishment all at once. "You're alive. You're safe. No thanks to you." The words were harsh, but she couldn't bring herself to soften them. The memory of his voice saying, "I know," right before he let Lysette swing that mallet was too fresh, too painful. No thanks to me at all. I failed you, Estes. In every way that mattered, I failed you. He didn't make excuses. He didn't try to explain or justify or defend himself. He simply stood there and accepted her accusation as truth. It made it harder to hate him. She almost wished he would argue. "What do you want, Darwin? Did you come to finish what Lysette started? To drag me back for another tribunal?"
Lysette is banished. She left Thornwood territory 3 days ago and will never return. I provided evidence of her crimes to her father and to the Elder Council. Her name has been struck from the pack records. She is nothing now.
Estes blinked. She had expected many things, but not this. Not retribution delivered so swiftly and completely. "You banished her? The daughter of Alpha Harrow? She tortured my mate. She framed an innocent woman. She violated every principle I swore to uphold when I became Alpha. I would have executed her if I thought I could do it without starting a war." The venom in his voice was genuine. The rage burning in his eyes was real. And somewhere beneath her own anger, Estes felt a flicker of something warm and unwelcome. "You keep calling me that, your mate. But you don't know anything about me. I'm just the servant who swept your floors, the Omega who sculpted little figurines in her spare time, the shadow you walked past 1,000 times without seeing. I saw you. I always saw you, Estes. Every time you entered a room, every time you passed by, every time your scent touched the air around me. My wolf has been going insane for 3 years, screaming at me to claim you, to protect you, to give you everything you deserved. But I couldn't. Why not? Because I was a coward. Because the alliance with Silvercrest was important for our territory's security. Because admitting I had found my fated mate in an Omega servant would have caused political chaos. Because 100 different reasons that all seemed so important and all feel so worthless now. He moved closer, slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal that might bolt at any sudden movement. I told myself I was being practical, responsible, that I was putting the pack's needs above my own desires. But the truth is, I was afraid of what everyone would think, afraid of disappointing my council, afraid of being the alpha who threw away everything for a woman with no status or connections. He stopped a few feet from her, close enough that she could see the tears gathering in his eyes, tears he wasn't even trying to hide. And then I watched her break your hands. I watched you scream. I let it happen because I still thought I could find a way to fix everything afterward, to punish Lysette quietly and make it up to you somehow. But there is no making up for what I did. There is no fixing this. I know that. I understand if you never forgive me. Darwin, I just needed you to know. I needed you to understand that I see what I did wrong. I see who I was, and I am ashamed of it. You deserved so much better than me. You still do. He dropped to his knees before her. An alpha, the most powerful alpha in the northern territories, kneeling in the dirt like a supplicant before a woman who had been nothing but his servant. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am not asking you to accept me as your mate. I am only asking for a chance to prove that I can be better, that I am willing to spend the rest of my life earning back what I threw away. Please, Estes, please give me that chance. She looked down at him, this powerful, beautiful, broken man, and felt the mate bond pulsing between them like a living thing. Her wolf, dormant for so long, stirred inside her for the first time, reaching toward him, wanting him, forgiving him even when her mind could not. You let me suffer. I know. You let her destroy the thing I loved most about myself. I know. And now you want me to trust you? To believe you've changed? Just because you said sorry and banished the woman who actually did the damage? No. I want you to give me time. Months. Years. However long it takes. I want you to watch me, test me, challenge me at every turn. I want you to make me earn every single moment of trust until you believe, not because I told you, but because you've seen it with your own eyes, that I would rather die than let anyone hurt you again. He looked up at her, and the naked vulnerability in his face was almost unbearable to witness. I love you, Estes. I have loved you since the moment my wolf first recognized you 3 years ago. I was too weak to act on it then, but I am not that man anymore. The alpha who let politics matter more than protecting his mate died in the tribunal chamber. What remains is only someone who wants to be worthy of you. She stared at him for a long, long time. The forest was silent around them. The wind had died. Even the birds seemed to be holding their breath. Then, slowly, she extended one crystal hand toward him. Get up. He rose, his eyes never leaving her face. This doesn't mean I forgive you. This doesn't mean I've accepted anything. I understand. But I will give you the chance you're asking for, because my wolf won't stop screaming at me to let you try. And because I'm tired of being alone. I've been alone my entire life, Darwin. And even though you hurt me, even though the pain of what you did still burns every time I think about it, you're the only one who has ever looked at me like I matter. She touched his cheek with her crystal fingers, and he shuddered at the contact, his eyes closing, his breath catching in his throat. Don't make me regret this. Never. I swear on my life, Estes, I will never make you regret this. They returned to Thornwood territory together, though Estes insisted on walking rather than letting Darwin carry her. She needed to enter the packlands on her own feet, with her head held high, showing everyone who watched that she was not a victim returning in defeat, but a power arriving to claim her place. The news had spread in her absence. The entire pack knew about the tribunal. the explosion of the Judgment Stone, the emergence of the crystal shaper. They knew their alpha had banished his intended mate and spent 3 days searching the forest for the Omega servant everyone had thought worthless. And now they watched, from their windows and doorways, as Darwin and Estes walked side by side through the main village, heading toward the Great Hall. Some faces showed fear, some showed confusion, but more than a few showed something else. Hope, perhaps, or the beginning of respect. Elder Cormac was waiting for them on the steps of the Great Hall, his expression thunderous. "Alpha Darwin, this is highly irregular. The Omega was found guilty by tribunal. Her presence here violates. The tribunal was based on falsified evidence provided by Lysette Harrow, who has since been banished for her crimes. Estes Morwen was innocent. She remains innocent, and anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me personally." Cormac's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "You can't simply—" "I can, and I will." Estes stepped forward, and the elder stumbled backward away from her glowing crystal hands. She didn't raise them threateningly, didn't need to. The mere sight of them was enough to remind everyone present what she was capable of. "I was falsely accused. I was tortured for crimes I didn't commit. The pack watched and did nothing. That is a debt I have not forgotten." She looked around at the gathered wolves, servants and warriors, elders and children, all the people who had witnessed her humiliation and cheered for her destruction. "But I am not here for revenge. I am not here to punish anyone for failing to speak up when speaking up might have cost them. I understand what it is to be powerless. I understand what it is to fear drawing attention to yourself." Her crystal hands dimmed slightly, becoming less threatening, more human. "What I am here for is change. I am here because your alpha has asked me to give him a chance to be better. And I am here because I believe, or I want to believe, that this pack can be better too. That we can create something new together, something where no one has to be afraid of speaking the truth. Something where innocents aren't sacrificed to politics and convenience." She turned to Darwin, who was watching her with such naked adoration that several wolves in the crowd exchanged knowing glances. "Is that something you're willing to work toward, Alpha? A pack where justice means more than order?" "With you beside me, I believe we can build anything." He extended his hand to her, an invitation, an offering, a symbol of partnership rather than possession. She took it. And somewhere in the depths of the Thornwood forest, in the ruins of the shattered Judgment Stone, the ancient spirit of Estes's great-grandmother smiled and finally allowed herself to rest. The weeks that followed were not easy. Trust was a fragile thing, and Darwin had shattered it thoroughly. There were nights when Estes woke in a cold sweat, the phantom pain of her crushed hands throbbing in her memory, and found she couldn't bear to look at the man sleeping in the chamber next to hers. There were days when his voice triggered flashbacks so vivid she had to leave the room. But Darwin kept his word. He was patient when she needed patience, and present when she needed support. He never pushed her, never demanded more than she was willing to give, never made her feel guilty for the slow pace of her healing. He attended every meal with her, introduced her to the pack as his honored guest, rather than claiming her as his mate, and made it clear to everyone that she was to be treated with the respect due to the woman he loved. And slowly, painfully, trust began to rebuild. She learned things about him that surprised her. He read poetry in the evenings, something he had kept secret from everyone, afraid it would seem unbecoming for an alpha. He had a dry sense of humor that emerged when they were alone, making her laugh at unexpected moments. He remembered every small detail she shared about her past, her favorite flower, the sculptor who had first taught her to work with clay, the melody her mother used to hum before she died. He was paying attention. He had always been paying attention. 6 weeks after her return, she finally allowed him to kiss her. They were standing in the sculpture garden she had created behind the great hall, a space that had been barren dirt before her arrival and was now filled with crystal flowers and stone benches and a fountain she had shaped from the earth itself. The moonlight caught the facets of her eternal hands, scattering rainbows across his face, and he looked at her with such wonder that her heart clenched painfully in her chest. "You're staring again?" "I can't help it. You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Every time I look at you, I find something new to love." "That's extremely cheesy." "I'm an extremely cheesy person when I'm around you. It's embarrassing." She laughed, a real laugh, unguarded and free, and something shifted between them. The tension that had been present since the tribunal finally eased, replaced by something warmer, something that felt like the beginning of real connection. "Darwin." "Yes?" "Kiss me." He moved slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind. His hands cupped her face gently, reverently, as if she were something precious and breakable, despite all evidence to the contrary. And when his lips finally met hers, the mate bond that had been straining between them for weeks finally snapped into place. It was like being struck by lightning and wrapped in warmth simultaneously. She felt him, really felt him, for the first time. His love, his regret, his desperate determination to be worthy, his wolf howling with joy, his heart beating in rhythm with hers. When they finally broke apart, both gasping, Darwin pressed his forehead to hers and spoke in a voice that shook with emotion. "I will spend every day of my life earning that. I swear it on everything I am." "I know you will." But peace, as Estes was learning, was never permanent in werewolf politics. 2 months after her return to Thornwood, a delegation arrived from Silvercrest territory. Alpha Harrow himself led the group, a massive, silver-haired wolf with cold blue eyes and a permanent sneer carved into his weathered face. He brought 20 warriors with him, all dressed in formal battle leathers, all armed to the teeth. And at his side, her head held high despite her banishment, stood Lysette. Estes watched from the window of her chamber as the delegation rode into the village square. Her crystal hands flickered with anxious light, and her wolf paced restlessly inside her, sensing danger. Darwin appeared in her doorway moments later, his face grim. "They're demanding an audience. Harrow claims the banishment was illegal and that I violated interpact treaty by punishing his daughter without his consent." "He can't seriously expect you to take her back." "He doesn't. This is about humiliation. He wants to force me into a public confrontation, make me look weak in front of my own pack, undermine my authority." Lysette has been whispering poison in his ear for weeks. Estes turned from the window to face him fully. "Then let's make sure that doesn't happen." "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that I've spent 2 months hiding behind you, letting you protect me, letting you fight my battles. But this is my fight too, Darwin. Lysette didn't just attack me. She attacked us, our bond, our future. And I'm done being a victim." She walked toward him, her crystal hands glowing brighter with each step. "I am the last crystal shaper. I can literally reshape reality. It's time I stopped being afraid of what that means and started using it. Darwin caught her hands, her beautiful, impossible hands, and brought them to his lips. There's the woman I fell in love with. The warrior who refused to break even when the whole world was trying to destroy her. Let's go meet our guests. The confrontation took place in the Great Hall, as all formal interpact disputes did. Alpha Harrow sat in a chair that had been provided for visiting dignitaries, his massive form radiating barely contained aggression. Lysette stood behind him, dressed in battle leathers of her own, a triumphant smile playing around her lips. Darwin sat on his throne, his expression calm and controlled, and beside him, not behind, not below, but beside, stood Estes, her crystal hands glowing softly in the torchlight. The hall was packed with wolves from both packs. The tension was thick enough to taste. Speak your grievance, Harrow. What brings Silvercrest warriors to my territory in such numbers? Alpha Harrow rose from his chair, his blue eyes blazing. You know damn well what brings me here, pup. You banished my daughter without my consent. You violated the treaty between our packs. You humiliated my bloodline over the word of an Omega servant. Your daughter framed an innocent woman for theft and personally crushed her hands with the judgment stone. The evidence of her crimes was overwhelming. Banishment was the merciful option. Harrow's face reddened with fury. Evidence? You mean the lies whispered to you by your little witch? Everyone knows what she is, what her kind can do. She probably planted those accusations herself, manipulated the minds of everyone involved. I did no such thing. Estes's voice was clear and calm, cutting through Harrow's bluster like a blade through silk. The old alpha turned his hostile gaze on her, and she met it without flinching. I am a crystal shaper, Alpha Harrow, not a mindbender. I can reshape stone and earth and metal, but I cannot manipulate thoughts or memories. The evidence of your daughter's crimes was gathered by Alpha Darwin through perfectly mundane investigation. Her scent in my quarters, threads of her gown at the scene, testimony from servants who witnessed her movements that night. She stepped forward, her crystal hands brightening until they cast sharp shadows across the hall. Your daughter is a liar, a schemer, and a torturer. She destroyed my hands out of petty jealousy, and the only reason she still breathes is because Alpha Darwin chose mercy over justice. Lysette's composure cracked. She stepped out from behind her father, her beautiful face twisted with rage. You dare speak to my father that way? You're nothing but a jumped-up servant with freakish hands. You don't belong here. You don't deserve. I dare because I have nothing left to fear from you. Estes raised one crystal hand, and the stone floor beneath Lysette's feet suddenly shifted. Not violently, not dangerously, but enough to make her stumble and fall to her knees. Gasps echoed through the hall. Even Harrow took an instinctive step backward. I could bury you in stone right now. I could seal you in the earth like your ancestors sealed my people 3 centuries ago. I could take everything from you, the way you tried to take everything from me. She walked toward Lysette, her crystal hands casting rainbow light across the terrified woman's face. But I won't. Because despite what you think you know about me, I am not cruel. I do not torture innocent people for political gain. I do not destroy what I cannot control. She knelt before Lysette, bringing their faces level. This is over, Lysette. Your schemes, your plotting, Your desperate attempts to claw your way back to power, it's all over. You lost. Accept it with whatever dignity you have left, and walk away. She rose and turned her back on Lysette, a gesture of absolute dismissal, and addressed Alpha Harrow directly. I bear no grudge against Silvercrest Pack. My quarrel was with your daughter alone, and that quarrel is finished. If you wish to maintain peaceful relations with Thornwood territory, I suggest you take her home and keep her far from here. But if you choose to press this conflict, if you force Darwin to defend his decisions with blood, then know that you will be fighting me as well. Her hands flared to blinding brilliance, and I promise you, Alpha Harrow, that is a battle you cannot win. Silence hung in the great hall like a held breath. Then, slowly, Harrow's shoulders dropped. The aggression drained from his posture. He was old and experienced, and smart enough to recognize when he was outmatched. You've made your point, Shaper. Silvercrest will withdraw. He turned to his daughter, his expression cold. Get up, Lysette. We're leaving. Lysette's face was a mask of humiliated fury as she struggled to her feet. She stared at Estes with hatred burning in her eyes, but she didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. The Silvercrest delegation filed out of the great hall in tense silence. Within the hour, they had left Thornwood territory entirely, and as the gates closed behind them, Darwin pulled Estes into his arms right there in front of the entire assembled pack. You were magnificent. I was terrified. You didn't show it for a second. He kissed her, deep and claiming and absolutely inappropriate for the setting. The crowd erupted in cheers and howls of approval. Estes found herself laughing against his mouth, joy bubbling up inside her like a spring finally allowed to flow. When they finally broke apart, Darwin turned to address his pack with Estes still held firmly in his arms. Let it be known throughout Thornwood territory and beyond. Estes Morwyn is my fated mate, my chosen Luna, and the most powerful woman in the northern lands. Anyone who threatens her will answer to me. Anyone who questions her place at my side will answer to her. He looked down at her with such naked love that her heart ached. Will you do me the honor, Estes? Will you stand beside me, rule beside me? Let me spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you. The great hall fell silent, every wolf waiting for her response. She thought about everything that had brought her to this moment, the pain, the betrayal, the transformation, the slow, difficult work of rebuilding trust from ashes. She thought about who she had been, the invisible Omega, the shadow servant, the woman who sculpted little figurines because it was the only beauty she was allowed to create. She wasn't that woman anymore. She was something new, something powerful, something forged in fire and crystal and the endless, stubborn determination to survive. And she was ready to claim her future. Yes. One word, but it changed everything. Darwin swept her into his arms and spun her around, laughing like a man released from a prison of his own making. The crowd erupted again, louder this time, the howls of celebration echoing off the stone walls and out into the night. And in the depths of Estes's crystal hands, the ancient power of the Shapers sang with joy. The mating ceremony took place 1 month later, on the night of the full moon. Estes had spent the intervening weeks getting to know her pack now, not just Darwin's. She established a training program for young wolves with artistic talents, teaching them the basics of sculpture and design. She used her powers to improve the territory's infrastructure, reshaping roads, reinforcing buildings, creating a beautiful central plaza where the pack could gather for celebrations. She wasn't just the alpha's mate. She was a leader in her own right, a contributor, a force for positive change. And every day, she fell a little more in love with the man who had once let her suffer, but was now doing everything in his power to make amends. The ceremony itself was held in the crystal garden she had created, now expanded to nearly an acre of impossible beauty. The full moon hung overhead like a silver blessing, and the entire pack had gathered to witness the binding of their alpha to his fated mate. Estes wore a gown of pure white that caught the light of her crystal hands and scattered it in rainbow patterns across her train. Darwin wore his formal blacks, but he had added a crystalline clasp at his throat, a miniature sculpture she had made for him, shaped like two wolves intertwined. The elder who presided over the ceremony, a kind, elderly woman who had replaced Cormac after his resignation and disgrace, spoke the ancient words of binding, with tears streaming down her weathered face. Do you, Darwin Vex, Alpha of Thornwood, take this woman as your mate? Do you swear to protect her, cherish her, and stand beside her through all the trials that may come? I do, with everything I am and everything I hope to become. And do you, Estes Morwen, Crystal Shaper, last of your line, take this man as your mate? Do you swear to trust him, challenge him, and help him become the alpha your pack deserves? Estes looked at Darwin, really looked at him. She saw the man who had failed her, and the man who had fought to be better. She saw the alpha who had knelt in the dirt, and the lover who held her through her nightmares. She saw her future, imperfect but beautiful, waiting to be shaped by both their hands. I do, with everything I am and everything I hope to create. The elder smiled. Then by the moon and stars and all the powers that govern our kind, I declare you bound. What the fates have joined, let no force tear asunder. Darwin pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and the mate bond that had been building between them for months finally completed itself with an almost audible snap. She felt him, all of him, flood into her consciousness. His love, his devotion, his fierce determination to spend the rest of his life making her happy. And she let him feel her in return. Her forgiveness, hard-won and precious. Her trust, rebuilt from rubble. Her love, growing stronger every day. The pack howled their congratulations to the moon. The crystal garden sparkled with captured light. And somewhere in the distant forest, where the ruins of the Judgment Stone had become a memorial to the last great awakening of the Crystal Shapers, the spirit of Estes' great-grandmother watched her descendant claim her destiny and smiled. 5 years later, Estes stood at the window of the Alpha's chambers, her chambers now, and watched the sun set over a transformed territory. Thornwood had become something remarkable under their joint leadership. The infrastructure improvements she had made had attracted new families seeking safety and stability. The training program she had established had produced a generation of artistically talented wolves whose works were now sought after throughout the Northern Territories. The political reforms Darwin had implemented, with her guidance, had created a more just and transparent system of governance that other packs were beginning to emulate. They had built something beautiful together, something lasting. something that would survive long after they were gone. Behind her, she heard the door open and the sound of small running feet.
Mama! Mama, look what I made! Estes turned to find her daughter racing toward her, chubby 4-year-old legs churning, a lopsided clay sculpture clutched in her tiny hands. Behind her, moving at a more dignified pace, came Darwin, with their infant son cradled against his chest. Little Amara had inherited her mother's dark hair, but her father's gray eyes. She had also inherited something else, a faint shimmer in her fingers that suggested the crystal shaper bloodline would not end with Estes after all. "Let me see, sweetheart." Estes knelt to examine her daughter's creation. It was a wolf, somewhat abstract, definitely lumpy, but unmistakably a wolf. "It's beautiful, Amara. You're getting so much better." "I'm going to be a sculptor like you when I grow up." "Sculptor, baby. And I think you're going to be even better than me." Darwin reached them and pressed a kiss to Estes's forehead, shifting their son so she could see his sleeping face. Little Corwin had his father's coloring entirely. Dark hair, pale skin, but his hands, when they caught the light just right, showed faint crystalline facets beneath the baby's soft surface. 2 children, 2 potential crystal shapers, a legacy that would continue. "You look happy." "I am happy. Genuinely, completely happy. I'm not sure I believed that was possible once." I remember finding you in that cave, certain you would never forgive me, certain I had destroyed any chance of having this." He wrapped his free arm around her, pulling her close, surrounding her with warmth and love and the steady presence of their bond. "Thank you for giving me a second chance, Estes. Thank you for trusting me when I hadn't earned it. Thank you for building this life with me." She leaned into him, their daughter playing at their feet, their son sleeping peacefully against his father's heart, the sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson outside their window. "Thank you for proving you deserved one." She lifted her crystal hands and let them catch the fading light, scattering rainbows across the walls of their chamber. They had been the instrument of her torture once, the target of cruelty meant to destroy her. Now they were symbols of her power, her legacy, her ability to shape reality itself into something better. "What are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking about the judgment stone, about what it said to me. That night everything changed. It told me I could shape reality. I thought it meant physically, reshaping stone and earth. But I think it meant something more than that." "What do you mean?" "I think it meant I could shape the reality of my life. Not just accept what was done to me, not just survive, but actually change the narrative. Take the story that was being written for me, the Omega servant, the victim, the broken thing, and sculpt it into something completely different." She turned to face him fully, her crystal hands framing his beloved face. "That's what I did, Darwin. I sculpted my reality. I took all the pain and betrayal and hopelessness, and I shaped it into this: a family, a purpose, a love story that almost didn't happen, but did, because I refused to let the worst moment of my life be the end of my story." Darwin's gray eyes were bright with emotion. "And you're still sculpting. Every day, every decision, every moment of grace and forgiveness you've shown me, every reform you've championed, every child you've taught. You're still shaping reality, Estes. You never stopped." "Neither did you. The man I married isn't the man who stood by at that tribunal. You shaped yourself into something better. You sculpted your own reality too." He kissed her softly, reverently, a promise renewed. We did it together. Yes, we did. Amara tugged at her mother's gown, demanding attention with the imperious persistence of a 4-year-old. Mama, stop kissing Papa! I want to show you something else! Estes laughed, that free, joyful laugh that still surprised her sometimes, so different from the silent suffering of her former life, and scooped her daughter into her arms. All right, all right. What else do you want to show me, my little artist? I made something special, but you have to come to the garden to see it. The garden? Well, then we'd better go look. The 4 of them made their way through the great hall, rebuilt and expanded over the years, now bright with crystal windows Estes had shaped herself, and out into the sculpture garden. It had grown significantly since its creation, now sprawling across nearly 3 acres, filled with impossible beauty that drew visitors from territories across the land. Amara led them to a small clearing near the back, where a child-sized mound of clay sat waiting. Watch, Mama! Watch what I can do! The little girl placed her hands on the clay, closed her eyes, and concentrated. Her brow furrowed with effort. Her small fingers trembled. And then, slowly, impossibly, the clay began to move. It shifted and flowed and reformed, guided not by physical manipulation, but by pure will. It wasn't precise. It wobbled and bulged in awkward places, but it was unmistakably intentional. The clay was becoming a flower. A crude, lumpy, beautiful flower. Estes's breath caught in her throat. Beside her, Darwin went very still. Amara, sweetheart, you didn't tell us you could do that. I wanted it to be a surprise. I've been practicing in secret. Am I doing it right, Mama? Am I a sculptor like you? Tears sprang to Estes's eyes. She knelt beside her daughter, wrapped her arms around the small body, and held her close. Yes, baby. You're a sculptor, a crystal shaper, just like me, and your great-great-great-grandmother before us. You're going to be amazing. Why are you crying? Did I do something wrong? No, sweetheart, no. You did something wonderful. These are happy tears, the best kind. She looked up at Darwin, who was watching them with an expression of such profound joy that it made her heart ache. She's really going to be like you. Both of them might be. The bloodline continues. It continues because of you. Because you gave me a chance when I wanted to run. Because you gave me a family when I thought I would always be alone. She rose, keeping one arm around Amara, and stepped into Darwin's embrace with their sleeping son nestled between them. This is my reality, Darwin. The one I sculpted from the ashes of that tribunal night. A pack that values justice. Children who will carry our legacy forward. A mate who fought to become worthy of the love he was given. And you at the center of it all. My Luna, my heart. The woman who reformed crystal and sculpted a reality more beautiful than anything I could have imagined. The sun had fully set now, and the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. The crystal flowers in the garden began to glow with their own gentle light, responding to the fading daylight as they always did, creating a wonderland of soft illumination around the Alpha's family. Amara yawned against her mother's shoulder. Corwin stirred and made a soft baby sound, and Darwin pressed his forehead to Estes's, breathing in her scent, feeling the pulse of their bond like a second heartbeat in his chest. Take me home, Luna. We are home, Alpha. She let her crystal hands glow brighter for a moment, surrounding them all in warmth and light, and let herself feel, fully and completely, the joy of the reality she had created. From broken Omega to Luna and Crystal Shaper, from tortured victim to beloved mate and mother, from invisible shadow to the most powerful woman in the Northern Territories. This was her story, and she had sculpted every word. Did you like the story? Do you want a part 2? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Also, tell us which state you're watching from so I can give you a shout out in the next video. Shout out to our friends from Milan, New Mexico, Kansas, Texas, Xenia, Ohio, Western North Carolina, Massachusetts, Queensland, Australia, Lewis, Scotland, Central Florida, San Jose, California, and more. Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay updated on our next uploads. Thanks for watching.